Welcome. In this demo, what I want to do is focus on what we call the cross-reference or the source lookup configuration. Now, some audience members may find this confusing. In the courses that I teach here and in practice, people find it confusing when we first present this topic, setting up the staging table lookups. But after you do it once or twice, you get the hang of it. You know what we're talking about. So maybe the description and the explanation is more confusing than the actual aspects of doing it. Now, using the same diagram of where we are, and this is what I think makes it a little bit odd. Remember that the data process flow has two levels. The definition, as I keep saying, defining or configuring, and then the execution of it. We have not done any execution. By that I mean we have not landed data. I have not run the staging jobs to change data from landing into the stage objects, and I have not loaded data into the based objects. We are defining the based objects, so we have just finished defining them, including relationships. The landing tables are done, and we are in the staging process. Right now, we're going to define the lookups. It is done in the staging process. That's where it is. However, we will not know if we have configured it correctly until we run it in the load phase. So 1, we configure in the stage process. 2, when we execute, when we run the load job, then we will know if I made a mistake in my configuring my lookups, or if I end up with system messages saying the lookup is undefined. So please be aware of that. Right now we're going to go to the staging process, which is where we defined the cross-reference lookups. Now, what is the lookup? Let me go into the hub, and I believe I'm logged in already. Okay. If you look at the hub, let me go to the schema viewer. We have our entities, we have our relationships. You could argue saying, that's all I need. If I ever say, where's the data? Where's customer Joe Smith? And where is the bill to address to customer Joe Smith? Or where is his ship to address? We should be able to figure this out. And in fact, you're right. However, from an implementation level, remember that we are managing master data. We are saving all the audit, all the records. If I had 3 Joe Smiths, Joey Smith, Joseph Smith, Joe Smith, and we determined that at the end of the day, after we have done match and merge, consolidated, we end up with, quote, the golden record, the best version of the truth of Joe Smith. Where are all the other records that we brought in? Where is the original data that created the Joey, the Joseph, and the Joe? We cannot lose that. Well, all that is being stored in the based object and its reference tables. What we need to do now is at runtime, figure out a way that the hub will know, is Joe Smith already there or not? For that, we need to know, was it already included? Where did it come from? So we need to have a way back to trace it back to the source. And that's what the lookup is doing. Now, when you only have one based object itself, if in my data model, all I had was customer, there is nothing more to do. The MDM hub does this. But what we need to define is when there is a relationship between 2 objects. In this case, remember, we have a relationship from address the child to the customer parent and from the address type. So earlier on, let me go to the schema. In an earlier demo, we defined various relationships. Let me go to address, and you can see the relationships. We define those. Because I have defined relationships, now I can configure the cross-reference lookup, and it is in the staging tables. I'm in the based object. I would go to the staging tables and configure those. For customer, did I define any relationships? No. I had no other parent object. And so I did not define any relationships. Do I have staging tables? Yes. Will I be able to set the cross-reference for the cross-reference lookup? No. There's no need. There is nothing that it needs to go and identify. So in my objects, there appear to be 2 that I need to set up the cross-reference. That's address and address type. Let me begin with address. Because I have the relationships defined, all I have to do now is go to the staging tables, and let me expand this for you. Before I actually configure it, let me show you where I want to go. Staging tables, for each staging table, you want to go to the columns and you want to find the foreign key. And if there is a relationship, you will be able to edit it. If not, you won't be able to edit it. Notice I cannot edit it, and that's because I don't have an acquired log. Remember, cannot modify things unless I have an acquired log. So let me go back now that I obtained one. Go back to the same STGCRM address and go to columns, and notice that the edit button on the right hand side is enabled. You'll see that when I showed you the customer, it will not be enabled. Okay, so that's where I want to go. But before I go there, let's review the staging tables. Remember that a based object will end up with, at the end of the day, many records that will need to be matched and merged, matched and consolidated. So at the end of the day, I should end up with one record that is the official best version of the truth. All the other records that were in here are resident in the cross-reference table. So remember, a based object has a lot of supporting tables. One of them is the xref. And if I open the cross-reference, if I open the based object itself, go to columns, you see all these systems. If you were to go to Oracle and look at the address cross-reference, you will notice a lot more system columns. One of them would be the p-key source. So from the cross-reference table, you would be able to know where it came from. Now, I could show you that now, but I don't want to confuse you. We really don't need to go to Oracle, so I'm just saying, if you were to go to Oracle, open the address cross-reference, you'll see a lot more system columns that provide the data lineage. That's the cross-reference table we need to be able, at execution time, know if a record is already there, and this is just an update, know if it is not there and it's a new insert, and also be able to find who is the contributing source data. So that explains that part here. And so address, let me minimize that. Now, address has 3 staging tables. This is a quick review on staging tables. They were already created and defined in a different demo. Here you quickly see, if you select the staging tables, you get all 3 of them. Notice that because we have not run this, nor have mappings yet, we are still able to change the source system. If I have made a mistake, I can still change. Once I execute and once I have mappings, I will not be able to change these. It'll be, yes, you can still edit it, but it involves a little bit more work. So here I can still change if I have made a mistake. Please make sure in your labs you review that you are the source system, that you are configuring the source system correctly. So the data coming into the staging CRM address is from the CRM. The data coming to the sales bill to and ship to is sales. Now, we have used good names, best practices. So it is telling me that it should be sales for bill to and ship to, and I'm just merely confirming. Had you used not good naming conventions, you might have to do a few more investigation steps. So those are my tables. Now, for every table, you can see them. On the right-hand side, you have the properties. You see the name of the display, the physical name that Oracle creates, and the table type, a staging, and the source system. So we've done that. And notice that you also have columns. This is where we're going to go and configure the lookup. We are in the staging process to configure the lookup, where when we execute this, we'll be in the load process. So we configure now, but not until the load process will we know if I have made a mistake, I forgot to configure, or I configured it wrongly. Okay? Now, once I expand the staging tables, I also get columns. Notice that I have shown the system columns. I don't want to do that. So now I have the display columns. Notice this is my data. Okay, so these are my columns that I have here. And this we did in an earlier demo when we were configuring it. I just want to repeat something that I said earlier in the standalone demo, that these columns come from the based object. If by chance in the staging definition you say, oops, I forgot an address. I forgot address line 1. I forgot address line 2. How come I don't see it? If you make those mistakes, it means that you have a logical mistake. The definition was not correct. In the staging process, if there's a column you need and you don't have access to it, it is because in the based object, you don't have it either. So you have to go back to the based object, add the column. Once you add the column, you go back to the staging table, and now it will be available. In other words, we cannot create columns in the staging. We can only use those that have been defined by the based object. And that's a typical mistake. Sometimes I develop objects and I realize, oh, I should have had this column. Well, I don't have it. I go back to the based object and add it. Okay? Now, remember, we're going to be building mappings later on. So any changes, modifications, the more I move down, the more dependencies I'll have. So just be aware of that. You might want to do a QA analysis on this and make sure that you have everything ready before we keep going. Now, back to staging tables. Notice that I have 3 there. Notice that for customer, I have 2. And my other object is the address type. I do need a staging table for this because this is going to provide, remember this has relationships. If you recall what we did earlier, it has the relationships from address type being the dummy intersection table. We have one to the address type table that has, is it a billing address shipped to address? And we also have it to the address, which is the address type to the parent address table. Because we have relationships, we should be able to add staging tables. But guess what? Do we have any? Oh, I forgot to add them. So we're going to create a new staging table for it because it was an oversight. Okay, so let's configure what we have first. First, the address. Pretty straightforward. So now we're just going to focus on the configuring the lookups. You select the first table. We have relationships, so I merely have to go to columns. Because I have defined the relationships, all you got to do is select the foreign key, edit, and now notice here, lookup system, make sure you get it correct. Is it coming from the CRM or sales? CRM. You always have to just remember that you're connecting to the parent based object cross-reference table, not the based object itself. Because remember, all the auditing, all the source data is being stored in the cross-reference table. So that's a common mistake people make. So notice that I'm in the customer cross-reference P key source. There it is. And that's all you got to do. You save that. And let me quickly finish the other ones. Again, this is the sales bill to address. Edit, because I have the relationship. I'm going back to the cross-reference. Pretty straightforward. Making sure that you have sales, that you don't inadvertently make a mistake and choose CRM. What would happen is, can I do that? Yes, it'll be a logical mistake. When we run this, then we're going to get a system error that says, cannot find the lookup for this object. So now I'm in the STG sales, cross-reference, notice sales. And for those of you, and I'm done, for those of you that are super intuitive and have SQL experience, what have I really done? Let me go back and quickly do this. Not to insult your intelligence, but a lot of you guys probably caught this. This is nothing but a big where clause. This is select from a table where the address and cross-reference tables where they're coming from the source system. You see, this is nothing but a big where clause. Using the cross-reference table, I want to know which staging table provided that record, because at runtime, that's where it's going to store. Okay, so I could have written a where clause in Oracle to test this and see if it will work. If I do that, what's the expected result? Nothing. If you get a syntax error, it's because you're linking incorrectly. Something is wrong here. If you get no data, that is correct for our demo because we have not loaded anything. In a production environment, if you get no data, maybe something is wrong, right? If you've been loading data, you should be able to retrieve data. So that's what I do to test this if I have done this correctly. Again, that's overkill. You don't need to do that, but just nice to know. Okay, so I'm pretty much done with this. Okay, address is done. Let's go to customer. Let's do the lookup for customer, CRM. Go to columns. Look, I cannot edit it. Does anyone know why? When in the demo on setting up the relationships, I sort of explained this. There is no parent to customer. I have no relationships. I said that even though I have a subcategory row ID, which the intent is to be a foreign key to a parent object subcategory, I never have that. I don't need it. In fact, I could go ahead and delete it. All right? It is an object, an entity that has not been created. but I wanted to leave it here to show you that I cannot edit this. And the primary reason is there is no relationship behind already defined. Okay, so forth. Now, there's an interesting issue now, address type, because I do need that. Is there any staging table? There is not. So let me quickly add a staging table. And because we are experts now, we should be able to really quickly go ahead and add a staging table. Let me call it STG. Remember our best practice. So this will be a staging table. And what should be a good name? Think about this, guys. What should be a good name for the staging table? Okay, let me just call it STG address. Okay, I'll just call it STG address type. Very creative, aren't I? All right. Now, notice the columns that I'm using are both of them because they come from the based object. Oops, you see that error? Cannot exceed 24. Remember I had said earlier that your staging table name should be a best practice name, but look, we just ran into the limits of 24 characters. All right, so let's rename this. Something that fits 24 and yet descriptive. STGCRM, this is better. In the display name, I should name it such that it also tells me which is the source system. So address, it has to be less than 24 characters. So I think I achieved that there. And look, CRM, what happened to my based object name? The physical name, it's not changing. All right, so you could type it in yourself, but let me cancel. I'm going to cheat. I don't want to do anything myself. So let's add it again. Since I had not saved it, I can still change it. And what I was focusing on there was on the physical name. And again, this is probably, again, overkill that I could have just typed it in, but I want to show you the physical name. There it is. You could have just typed it in. As long as you do this before you save, you can edit it. The CRM is a system. I'm using both columns from the based object. And how can this be? The table's physical name cannot exceed 24 characters. Okay, this is a live demo. So notice what I'm facing here. An extra space. Okay, I did not intend that. So let me just make it address T. That should be 24. Those of you that have great eyesight, okay, those of you that have a good eyesight, let's see if that in fact, let me cut and paste. Okay, cancel out again, and let's create it again. This time I'm going to be careful that it should be there. Both, am I counting wrong? Oh, okay. All right, I'm going to make it shorter. Again, nothing wrong with showing you mistakes because this is how we learn. So I'll call this STGCRM, ADDR type. How does that sound? 24 characters or less? There it is. Boy, unexpected that. Okay, but errors are good when we're learning. So now I have my staging table. What is next? Is the relationship defined already? Remember, did we already define a relationship? Well, in fact, we did. We already defined the relationships earlier. So we don't need to define them. We merely have to then assign them. Okay, so I go back to the staging table, columns, and you got to be careful here. Let me maximize this. Address row ID should be the address cross-reference. Okay, and then the other one, address type, notice how the software helps me. It already identified the based object and already identified the cross-reference. Now, the mistake that people do is that they change this. So for the lookups as we are defining them, this is correct. Why does the software give me the ability to toggle to another based object? Because in fact, we can do other things with lookups. But right now we're defining the cross-reference lookup, the CRM, and I believe I have not created a hiccup mistake here, and I am done. Okay, and let's go back to the data viewer. We don't see a difference because that was done at the configuration level of the staging object. And as I mentioned, we don't know if this has been configured correctly unless and until we run the load job. And remember what the staging table is. The staging table is data that has been moved from landing into staging we've cleansed it, we've modified it, and then when we load the data, it will be moved from landing. Finally, it will be an insert or an update to a based object data. Okay, so that concludes this demo, and thank you.